If you are tired of surface level astrology that sounds like vague stereotypes and generalizations and are interested in actually getting to the bottom, the origin, the ancient occult core of this powerful system, then you might want to subscribe to my channel. Welcome to Promethea Astrology. My name is Alina and I am the astrologer for creatives and changemakers. Today we're talking about the Zodiac and specifically the ancient origins of the Zodiac. I will get into as much as we can tell about the roots and development and evolution of the zodiac. I'll talk about the different types of zodiacs, where they come from and what they mean, and also contextualize the zodiac in the practice of astrology. And if you stay till the end, then you'll also hear about the fascinating occult origin of the Exaltation, Detriment, Fall, Domicile system. And if there's something you want to dive further into, I will link the timestamps and also my sources and citations in the description below. This is a part of a series I'm doing on the zodiac where I'm getting into first all of the core qualities that sort of describe what the zodiac is, and this is now the precursor of my big series diving into each of the signs one by one. So I wanted to start with the history and kind of broader context for the zodiac. So what is the zodiac? Maybe you've heard this buzzword floating around in astrology circles, but aren't sure exactly what the real basis of that is. So in the most fundamental, basic definition, universal understanding, the zodiac is a set of constellations. A constellation is just a group of stars that people in the distant past thought looked like a certain god or symbol or something. Basically, kind of characters that were seen in the sky. So if you can imagine being an ancient astrologer, not having any of the modern science that we enjoy today, you can think of astrologers gazing out into the universe and noticing that most of the stars around them don't seem to move relative to each other, that maybe there's this kind of rising and setting of the stars, but they mostly stay in a fixed configuration, except there were these 7 bodies in the sky that did not move around so fixed. They would wander around, and this is what they referred to as the wandering stars, the planets in astrology, whereas the constellations in the zodiac, that was a part of the realm of the fixed stars. So it appeared that some stars were fixed, not moving in space, and others seemed to wander around. So in short, the zodiac is a set of constellations in the realm of the fixed stars. However, today, if you're a Western astrologer using the tropical zodiac, then the current zodiac no longer is in alignment with those constellations because of something called precession. And this is something astrologers have actually known about for a really long time. Every couple of years, there's got to be a big article in New York Times that's like, your zodiac sign is not what you think it is. And then everyone's like, oh, the zodiac isn't real. And astrologers are like, we've literally known this for thousands of years. Astrologers have been talking about this for so long. This is not news. So if you use the current position of the stars and the constellations as your zodiac, that's called the sidereal zodiac. And this is something that Vedic or Indian astrologers tend to use. And you can kind of see how this works out in the graphic I have here, where you'll see there's the position of the constellations where they actually are in the sky right now versus where they were at the time that the tropical zodiac was developed. And then also sort of the actual shape and size of the constellations versus the zodiac version of that constellation, which divides the 360-degree circle into 12. So these 30-degree slices. There's sort of 3 zodiacs illustrated here. The tropical zodiac, though not in alignment with the constellations, instead is in alignment with the equinoxes. So rather than Aries in the zodiac being a 30-degree slice in the sky over the constellation Aries, in the tropical zodiac, Aries aligns with the spring equinox and the slice of the sky that the sun travels through during that first trimester of spring. So in the tropical zodiac, we do consider the symbol and the constellation and the origin of that sign. But more importantly, possibly, is that Aries also embodies qualities of the spring and what it means to be at the beginning of the spring, at the beginning of the new year, astrological year. And so some of the qualities that we get for Aries is more in alignment with this tropical conceptualization of the zodiac. If you were using the sidereal zodiac of the constellations, then it wouldn't really make sense to consider Aries a cardinal sign, because being cardinal means that it is the beginning of spring. But if you're using the sidereal zodiac, then Aries is not the beginning of spring. It's where the constellation Aries is. And then even with these distinctions, there's still kind of a third zodiac. So this inner wheel is like our 30-degree slices of the tropical zodiac in alignment with the seasons. And then the outer wheel is the sidereal zodiac in 30-degree slices in alignment with the general direction of the constellations. And then even beyond that, in this graphic, you can see that the actual size of the constellations is not really 30 degrees. Some of them are kind of smaller, like Cancer, and some of them are much bigger, like Virgo. So you could even consider not these idealized 30-degree slices, but rather the literal, measurable, kind of angular size of the constellations, and really watch the astrology relative to those stars that the constellation is made of. So some people use one of these three. And a lot of times astrologers will figure out ways to kind of combine these different zodiacs and maybe derive different meaning from different zodiacs in different contexts and ways. But the reason that the tropical zodiac doesn't align with the sidereal zodiac is because of precession, which is the wobble of the Earth's axis. So I think it's like 1 degree every 72 years. So that is very slow. So it would take 2,160 years to go a full 30 degrees for the zodiac to shift over an entire sign. And at this point, we are almost there. You can see in the graphic, it's not quite an entire sign that things have shifted, but nearly. So now Capricorn is sort of on top of Aquarius, almost maybe like another 5 degrees or something. So that's kind of interesting. So then how old is the zodiac? Well, you'd have to ask which zodiac. So the most ancient archaeological artifact we have evidencing a zodiac is from a 14th century BCE Egyptian depiction of the Decans. Now, I'm not totally clear about if the Decans from this 14th century BCE Egyptian artifact are the same Decans that we use today. I think the constellations that the ancient Egyptians used that far back were different from the more contemporary Hellenistic constellations. There would have been 1,500 years between those time frames, so a lot could have shifted. But at least in this ancient Egyptian depiction, there were stars correlating to 36 different little sections of the sky. So this idea of aligning the 12 slices of pie that we kind of use to map the sky here in the zodiac with the seasons didn't come around until like 500 to 1000 BC or something like that. So that would have been up to maybe 1,000 years after the first record of kind of a zodiac is discovered. And it was the Babylonians that divided the sky into 12 equal signs. So that would have been around 500 BCE. And so as best as we can tell from the astronomy, it seems like the current tropical zodiac that we have probably originated around 408 BC. But at the time that it was developed back then, they were still aware of precession and were choosing to keep their zodiac in alignment with the stars and not the seasons. So people were already kind of talking about that differentiation way back then. So it was Ptolemy in the 2nd century who firmly established the tropical zodiac as in alignment with the equinoxes and the solstices rather than the constellations. However, the different qualities of the zodiacs, like the elements, for instance, didn't seem to be developed until maybe another 200 years after that. So even though Ptolemy gave us or fixed the tropical zodiac as its own system in the 2nd century, the qualities like the elements and maybe the quadruplicity and things like that were developed later. But at that time, at the origin of the tropical zodiac, astrologers did also draw on qualities from the constellations as well. They were mostly in alignment at that point still. And I think it's really fascinating to just consider that one of the foundational assumptions that you're required to make as an astrologer is that the moment of something's origin has something to say, the quality of that moment, with the character of that thing for the duration of its life, right? So this moment of your birth that we draw the birth chart from, whenever a business comes into the world, it's always the start of something. So when something goes from not existing to existing, that moment can tell us kind of the underlying character or nature of that thing for the duration of its life. Even when you're very old, your birth chart is the same, although different moments in time will highlight different pieces of it, and it's not that you're literally the same, but this core blueprint is somehow kind of always with you, describing your nature at all times. So it makes sense to me then that the origin of the zodiac, when the tropical zodiac, came into official being, existence, and was named and birthed in a sense, that core imprint of where things were, the stars at the moment of the origin of the zodiac, also would give us information about that for the rest of its life. So even though the stars are not currently where the constellations were at the time of the zodiac's origin, we can still consider that the chart for the birth of the zodiac is probably still operational. I think it just makes a lot of sense that we would still consider the configuration of the stars at the moment of the zodiac's origin as astrologers to be significant. So I think it's fair that we can still derive meaning from the signs based on the constellations that they were originally based off of, even though that zodiac sign is no longer actually literally in front of that constellation if you use the tropical zodiac. So in the practice of astrology, to contextualize the zodiac in kind of the mythology and narrative of astrology, you can think of these 4 pillars of astrology: the zodiac signs, the houses, the planets, and the aspects. Within this framework, ancient astrologers understood the zodiac to be like kingdoms in the sky. So these are kind of like the countries or regions in this sky world. And in this sky world of the zodiac, the planets or wandering stars are like the characters or gods that would traverse around the sky world. And so some of these planets really enjoyed certain zodiac signs which support their nature and have a similar nature in some way, and some zodiac signs are very antithetical to the planet's nature and could be very difficult places for them to be. For instance, if you are a hippie flower child at heart and that's who you really are, but you find yourself born in Philadelphia or something, and it's like, oh, like my nature is still this free flower child, but this environment I'm in really doesn't support that, so it's hard for me to express it, and I feel out of place here and not as supported. So that's kind of how you can imagine the zodiac signs and the planets. And I'll get into more about how and why certain planets are more or less comfortable in some signs over others. And then the aspects in astrology are like the relationships between the characters. So do the planets or gods even have a relationship? And if they do, then is it harmonious and supportive, or is it conflict and difficult? So that's sort of how we get the whole narrative of astrology. And the moment of your birth, the birth chart, is like a freeze frame from a film video or something. So it's like this scene in this ongoing plot where there's just this theater of the gods in the sky world. And so whatever kind of the energetic moment, the story of that plot in that moment becomes kind of the energy of who you are, and can also tell us about your future. So in the zodiac, there's this concept of domicile. So this is how we can tell one of the conditions of dignity for a planet. So in astrology, we can sort of rank how supported or not supported a planet is. We can kind of evaluate, is this planet under attack? Is it in a zodiac sign that supports its nature? Is it in a house that is a happy home? Or, lots of different little things that we can do to kind of evaluate how well a planet is doing. And so looking at the domicile is one of those things. The domicile is considered to be like the home of that planet. So if you imagine the planets as gods, each of these gods is king or queen of one or two of these zodiac kingdoms in the sky. So domicile is where that planet is king. You can think of the zodiac sign as like an expression of that planet's nature. So the planetary energy is a little bit more abstract, a little bit more core, and then the zodiac is like kind of one level of expression. So for instance, Sagittarius is ruled by Jupiter, and so is Pisces. And so Sagittarius is like the mutable fire expression of Jupiter. That's the element in quadruplicity of Sagittarius. And then Pisces is the mutable water expression of Jupiter. And so we get these different flavors of Jupiter, but Jupiter is kind of like the core archetype underneath of them. So the zodiac signs are like an expression of their planetary ruler in a sense. And the way they assigned which planets ruled which zodiac signs, I think is so cool. So the sun and the moon, considered to be planets in ancient astrology and modern astrology, they are just one of the many orbs of light in the sky. The biggest one, we call them the luminaries. So the luminaries, the sun and the moon, biggest, brightest orbs of light in the sky, came to rule the brightest parts of the year. So you can see in my diagram here, this is from Chris Brennan. I took his course and have so many good things to say about him. Love him. So this is his graphic where you can see that the sun and the moon in the domicile scheme are assigned to the brightest parts of year. So the moon rules Cancer, which is the beginning of summer, and then the sun rules Leo, which is the middle of summer. And then if you just go out on either side of Cancer and Leo, the planet that rules those signs is the next closest to the sun. So it basically goes out Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn from there on either side. And of course, ancient astrologers at the time that the domicile scheme was invented were not aware of the heliocentric universe, that the sun was in the middle, and that was like the order of the planets from the sun. So to them, they based this off of which moved the fastest to the slowest. So the fastest moving planet, Mercury, we can measure the speed of the planets in the sky, is closest to the sun and the moon, and then the second fastest, Venus, and then the next fastest, Mars. So this has to do for them, they figured it out through the speed of the planets. The exaltation and detriment scheme is super cool too. So ancient astrologers divided up the planets into daytime planets and nighttime planets. So the daytime planets are Jupiter, Saturn, and the sun. And then the nighttime planets are Mars, the moon, and Venus. Each of the places of exaltation for the daytime planets is trine to their domicile. So you can see, for instance, the sun has its exaltation in Aries, which is trine to its domicile Leo, and Saturn has its exaltation in Libra, which is trine to its domicile in Aquarius, and Jupiter has its domicile in Pisces, which is trine to its exaltation in Cancer. And then the nighttime planets, their places of exaltation are sextile to their places of domicile rulership. So the moon exalted in Taurus, sextiled to its domicile Cancer, Venus exalted in Pisces, sextile to its domicile Taurus, and Mars exalted in Capricorn, sextile to its domicile Scorpio. And it's so cool that they made these aspects different because 3, the odd numbers, are a masculine number in Pythagorean numerology, which is also how it came to have some of its symbolism in astrology. And then the sextile 6 is a feminine number. So the nighttime planets have the feminine aspect, and then the daytime planets have the masculine positive aspect. So the trine and the sextile are the 2 positive aspects, whereas the square and the opposition are the 2 difficult or challenging aspects. And so the exaltations are in a positive relationship to their domicile. So it's the trine for the daytime planets, the masculine aspect, and the sextile for the nighttime planets, the feminine aspect. And the sextile dividing the circle by 6 is positive because it's 3 times 2, 6. And so it's like it has 3 inside of it, and 3 is like the most positive aspect. And then the sextile is like a good aspect, but not like amazing because it's half as powerful as the trine because it's literally twice the number, also feminine rather than masculine. And I'll do a whole video about the origin of the symbolism for the aspects because I think that's so cool. But anyway, wanted to throw that out for you guys. Let me know if you care or if you're like, what is she even talking about? This is way too nerdy for me. Would love to know. So then a planet's detriment is simply opposite to its domicile. So this is a very difficult place for a planet to be. It is opposite to its nature its intrinsic way of being, opposite geometrically and also symbolically, opposite to its character, its nature. And naturally, the planet's fall is opposite to its exaltation. And then the last thing I'll say about all of these fascinating zodiacal origins is that there is a birth chart for the world in astrology. Astrology does have a cosmology, and here is a picture of it. So this is the birth chart for the origin of the world, which has all of the planets in their domicile with Cancer rising, which is also super interesting. Cancer is the archetype of the mother, so it kind of makes sense that it would be the hour marker of the mother for the birth of the world. So let me know if you have any questions about any of that in the comments or what you think about any of this, and stay tuned. Be sure to subscribe if you want to hear all of my delineations for each of the zodiacs specifically based on their core components. I also have this zodiac graphic that is super useful when you're starting to learn astrology. If you are wanting to really kind of steep yourself in the symbolism and get that kind of imagery and symbolism into you and memorize these different qualities and the geometry of it all, I really recommend that you give this a download. It's a free thing you can get on my website, so there's a link for that in the description if you want. And of course, I am a consulting astrologer. I offer consultations, so if you would like me to read your birth chart for us to talk about who you really are, what your purpose is, and what your future holds, you can book a consultation with me in the link below. Thank you.